program. It is still the first quarter of the year, so I'd like to say welcome to your best year yet. If it is your first time of tuning in on the program, Health Digest is your one-stop health program that aims to bring body, soul, and mind all working in unison. My aim is to optimize your health. I bring you the latest information happening in the medical field. I bring you the latest happenings when it comes to the experts, technological advancements, and everything you need to know to optimize your health. Yeah, so we'll be speaking on the experts on quite a number of areas. First things first. We have been looking at a number of issues, and we must say the stories concerning the snake bites and the anti-venom have been topping the health news. So we're going to be looking at some tips on how to ensure that should such unfortunate incident happen, that you get the best aid properly to ensure that we, reduce the, I like to call it pointless or senseless loss of lives. But another interesting factor is the 4th of February is World Cancer Day. It's a day set aside to create awareness on the plight of people living with cancer and to ensure that, you adhere to practices that can actually reduce that. Food brings people together, transcending borders and generations. Cooking healthy allows you to nourish your body while preserving flavors and traditions. The Almat hospitality industry put together a food court to promote healthy living and nutritious meals for better bonding and family culture.
Food is a great conversation starter. Food is a great way to mix cultures, to meet new people, and understand where people are coming from. But another thing that brings us together is to reintroduce people to other people's type of food. Nigeria has such a robust and great cuisine.
We have promoted so many other cultures across the globe. As a chef, I had to sit back and say we need to look inward and promote our own.
By incorporating healthy cooking into daily life, individuals can experience the benefits of improved health, mental state, social benefits, and so much more.
A lot of people have health challenges. So what we're basically trying to do is trying to make them understand that we have locally things produced here. They are very healthy. And that's where the millet comes in. So if you notice, most of the productions we have here are actually made from millet, orange flex potato, and vitamin A rice. So basically, we're trying to tell people that within what we have, we can actually create different recipes out of it.
You've been involved in production and training globally, and we have realized that in order to inculcate the Nigerianness into the younger generation of chefs, we need to set up a culinary institute.
Cooking healthy meals helps manage weight, reduces the risk of obesity, diabetes, and prevents chronic illness, as well as promotes job creation in the industry. Don't go ahead.
You are welcome, all the champions in the house.
In a bid to create cancer awareness in children, the Optons Foundation dedicated its time to promote activities children diagnosed with cancer.
An opportunity for us to sensitize the public about pediatric cancer. So we're going around the city, making as much noise as possible in the process, educating the public about childhood cancer. We're also sharing, flyers that contains information about, pediatric cancer. And we've encountered a lot of persons on the way who had no idea that children actually have cancer.
It all started that I purged, I vomited sometimes. I was dewormed, but there was no remedy. Not until when we went to UATH and they tested me, but the test was pretty long, so we run scan and they said it was cancer.
It organized a public rally aimed at spreading awareness about childhood cancer, which brought about volunteers from the medical professionals, families, and supporters who marched with a mission to spread love, hope, and healing.
When you start seeing all those symptoms, take your child, go check what actually is wrong with them.
For me, I would say don't leave anything to chance or to guesswork. If you are feeling ill, they should go to the hospital.
The Opai Children's Foundation, in partnership with other non-governmental organizations, works hard to change the narrative for childhood cancer in Nigeria and in the health field. Ukemere Tokwa, AIT News, Abuja. And today I'm going to be speaking to a very interesting person. In fact, I should call him at this point a house guest. Yes, I'm talking about, I like to call him Dr. Ozzy. He's going to be speaking to us about cancer, and I like the dimension that his organization goes to. We look at different areas of cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer, but often we tend to forget that the little people also suffer from cancer. So here with me is Dr. Ozzy. Thank you so much for joining me this
Thank you,
morning.
Keme, for having me.
Thank you.
Thank
So let's get a holistic picture on cancer and what this day actually means. And should it be just today, or how long should this awareness be for, especially in Nigeria right now?
Considering the peculiarities in Nigeria, I would say that every day should be World Cancer Day in Nigeria, you know, giving us opportunities to talk about cancers, especially in children. Every adult knows when there are symptoms that are related to, you know, some abnormalities in the body. But a child has no clue as to what, you know, is normal and what is not normal. And all they do is just cry or scream, you know, for help. And that's why I feel a little bit uncomfortable even with the data that we're projecting globally about pediatric cancers. Because I think a lot of childhood cancers are unreported or underreported. An adult would know, haven't read or Googled some information about some symptoms and signs and begin to suspect, you know, cancer. But a child who has pains in the bones or a headache would not immediately, you know, project anything related to cancer until it is much late in the life of that particular disease before it is presented. So yes, the general concept about cancers in Nigeria is that it is not even common, you know, whether in children or in adults. It is only recently that you find a lot of emphasis or advocacy related to cancer. Prior to this time, it was a taboo to mention cancer. In short, if you talk cancer in your neighborhood, everybody will stigmatize you and avoid you, like cancer was contagious. So the point to be made in the first instance is that you cannot really transmit cancer from one person to the other. And this is particularly important in the cases of children, where the parents would, as much as possible, you know, once a child has been diagnosed of cancer, try to isolate that child from the general public. And so the child loses out in a lot of issues regarding education,
yeah,
and socialization, because we find cases where children suffering from cancer are usually locked up, you know, in the homes, because the parents feel that, hey, it's already a bad image for them that their child has cancer. And so the consequences are grave, because most times these children never even get access to care. So whilst the general data about cancer in Nigeria is that we have about 127,000 persons coming down with cancer annually in Nigeria, and only about 7.2% of this population suffer from childhood cancer. I think, well, that's data, that's statistics, but in reality, I can say it is even much more than that 7.2%.
What would you say are some of the contributing factors to cancer? Is it that people are just getting more sensitized about this, or has this been an issue that has been in Nigeria with us, or are there some growing trends that might be increasing, you know, this, well, as you have said, it's not transmittable, but it's something that can be acquired?
Yeah, for the adult cancers, we can talk about environmental factors. We can also talk about lifestyle habits and, you know, even dietary habits. I'll give you an instance. Before now, colorectal cancer was not a common cancer amongst adults. But dietary changes, we eat less of fiber these days, and it's beginning to affect how we
our digestive system. So we're beginning to record a higher incidence of colorectal cancers amongst adults. And one mention that must be made about cancers in Nigeria is that it is infection related. When you have recurrent infection of particular kind of diseases, typically malaria, the recurrent incidence of malaria in an adult or a child predisposes that child or adult to development of certain cancers. So environmental factors also plays a role where, when you're constantly and regularly being exposed to infections, you're predisposed to cancer. Another common case is the cervical cancer, which is also a factor of exposure to HPV, the HPV. So when a woman, for instance, is constantly being exposed or infected by that virus, chances also of developing cervical cancer also comes into play. Interestingly, it is not as if the incidence of cancer has suddenly increased in Nigeria. It is just that the awareness is now much, than we had before. So you find that because we constantly talk about it, the name that used to be, the disease that used to be referred to as some other forms of disease now are being classified as cancer. Whilst in the time past, it could have been attributed to witchcraft, could have been attributed to spiritual attack. Now we know that this is actually cancer that is treatable. And this is where we cannot rule out in Nigeria the place of spirituality,
yes,
in our lifestyle. And this is why, for me, one of my very common call to action that I normally give to people is that you cannot rule out spirituality in the lives of people. But what I would say is that you should pray, but as you are praying, pray on your way to the hospital. So you combine both. You don't lose anyway.
For those that are Christians,
exactly.
The Bible says faith without works
is dead.
Is dead. So you must actually carry out some actions that follow through.
You must.
But I'd like to further know, when it comes to the management and the treatment of cancer, what would you say the Nigerian hospital system is doing to ensure that it meets international and global targets on the procedures and management?
I think first and foremost, we need to build capacity, of our healthcare providers. I'm not too sure we have the requisite number of healthcare providers to tackle the issues that are related to, cancer. You find very few oncologists in our hospitals. Whilst you may find so many obstetricians and gynecologists, at every nook and cranny of the city, it's difficult to find oncologists in that same number. And interestingly, the proportion of oncologists to the patients in Nigeria is quite low. So you may find one oncologist, attending to, thousands of people. And this builds a backlog. So what we need to do in the first instance is see how we can build, capacity. I know that this is not something you do overnight, but it has to be intentional, it has to be deliberate, and government must play its part. Now, outside the area of human resource, there is also, of course, equipment. And these are high-end equipment and actually very difficult and expensive to acquire. Take, for instance, I think there's very limited radiotherapy services available in Nigeria. I know that there's currently a concerted effort, to see how we can increase the capacity of our hospitals to provide such services. And it's not just a hospital. When you talk about a hospital, you're talking about a physical structure. It's actually a systemic condition, a systemic issue.
Yes.
And this is why I want to commend the effort of NICRATS. NICRATS is currently trying to, really increase the availability of care to Nigerians, whether it's in the area of funding for healthcare or it's in the area of support, both for human development and, increasing the capacity of these healthcare facilities to provide services.
Thank you so much for those insights. So when it comes to cancer in children, as I know that your foundation caters to, what are some of the initiatives that you are doing? Because I got to speak and hear some of the success stories and testimonies of some of the, I would say, survivors. What is your organization doing to eliminate or to reduce the cases of cancer in children or to better manage?
Okay, well, if you're going to better manage these cases, they must come early and, get the right treatment. So what we do is to try and scoop up these cases where they are in the community. And we do that by increasing the awareness and knowledge of, both the community and the caregivers themselves. When I say caregivers, I even mean the parents, generally. So what we've been doing currently is to target these children in their schools and target the community itself. In the last few days, we've been involved in sensitization of schools. You see, children are very instrumental in our effort to reduce this scourge. Because in the first instance, why the stigmatization is prevalent is because these children are not even aware that these cancers are real and that these children really do not carry the cancer as an infection. So we go from school to school in the FCT, educating these children on the causes of cancer, if there is, on the signs and symptoms of cancer, and then on treatment options. And most importantly, we let them know that a child has cancer doesn't mean that child is going to die. We know our spiritual attachment to life and death. So we try as much as possible, so the death should not come near my neighborhood. So a child who has cancer is already programmed like a living corpse. And so nobody wants to hang around that child. And we know that psychosocial support is very important in treating any of these diseases. Yes. And that's why we support the community as a whole by providing them with requisite information and knowledge. So we train these children on how to identify cancers early, even for themselves. And then we also empower them by identifying, champions amongst them who go also to the community to educate their contemporaries who are not in their school. Because as a foundation, Okapi Children Cancer Foundation cannot cover the whole of the schools in the FCT. So we pick particular schools, using those schools as clusters, and then help to spread information around the school. Then often we also go to the community itself to sensitize the men and the women. And we don't do that just by going to talk to them. We also come with some, no matter how minimal it is, identify persons who are predisposed to set different types of cancers. So we do a community outreach and provide some medical services to them. And we give them drugs, we give them glass. We also treat them for malaria because we know that malaria constantly recurring in a child or an adult is also a sign that something is wrong. When you treat malaria constantly and it doesn't seem to abate, then there's a need for further evaluation. So we go there with medications, we treat them, we offer them some psychosocial support. Those are some of the things we do at the community level. And then we also realize that even the caregivers need support. A woman or a caregiver who has been in the hospital for the past 6-7 months, treating a child, losing a ton of children in the hospital, has some mental, health to deal with. Yes, it's burnt out. So we also go there. We have, psychologists, we have mental health experts that we take to such facilities to educate these people and also to help them cope with the challenges that they face. These are some of the things we are doing to see how we can actually contribute to reducing this burden. Apart from that, that's at the social level, we also provide support financially to these children who are being treated. In National Hospital, in Federal Medical Center, Jabi, and then in the University of Abuja Teaching Hospital, only last year we raised roughly about 30 million naira, which we have spread across these 3 institutions to see how children come around. And when they send us their report, we give them financial support within 24 hours, whatever they request for treatment. We give them, to treat these children, whether it be for treatment, whether it be for investigations, anything, even for admissions. Because we've also realized that the financial burden is one of the reasons why there is treatment abandonment. A child comes to the hospital today, for the next 6 months you won't see that child. By the time you encounter the parent, he will tell you, look, I could not afford to continue treatment. So, and that the chances of that child surviving, reduces every time that child doesn't come for treatment. Even a child who has been treated, in order to avoid remission, we have to also incorporate such children into the treatment plan.
Thank you so much for that. So that is from the Okapi Foundation. Absolutely amazing. As I often say, you're a man of many hats, so we're going to move you to the programs manager of the Emergency Medical Association, agency rather, for the FCT. So The issue of the snake bites have been on the news and on the tongues of many Nigerians, and a snake bite is a medical emergency. What exactly does your agency have in store for cases like that? And before the ambulance services get there, last time on the show, we actually called the medical ambulance services and it went through. Now, because we work in a physical realm, they might not be able to get there in the blink of an eye. What should you do in the time span before you get medical assistance if you have a snake bite? As we round off. Okay, thank you very much. The first thing we should do is to separate the victim from the snake. That's the very first process you should do. Let the snake be separate from the, from the victim. And then secondly, what we normally advise is that such victims should remain as calm as possible. If possible, let's restrict movement of that, especially the limb that was, bitten by the snake. Immobilize it, as much as possible, as if it was a fracture. Immobilize it, tie a bandage around it, not a splint, not a tourniquet, rather. The mistake most people make is to tie a very tight band, at the site of that bite. And that's going to cause a lot of damage. So make a splint, using any hard object that will make that limb immobile. And then take that person as quickly as possible to the nearest healthcare facility. If possible, call an ambulance so that they can actually move that patient to the hospital. The danger in constantly moving or sustaining movement for somebody who has been bitten by a snake is that you use your muscles to do a lot of this movement. And interestingly, the snake venom really doesn't move through the bloodstream. It moves through the lymphatic system, and this is related to the muscles. So you must, as much as possible, ensure that that part of the body doesn't move. The muscles are not, don't exert any activity on that part of the body, especially the muscular part, so that you keep it still and then rush to the nearest hospital. Do not suck, do not try to cut, do not apply alcohol. Just take it to the nearest hospital where an antivenom will be applied to, that person. Thank you so much for that. And the hospitals that your agency works with, is the anti-venom available? Oh yes, in all the FCTA hospitals, we have enough anti-venom, that can be administered, for any snake bite. All the FCTA hospitals, 14 of them, they have anti-venom stocked, ready for any emergency. Thank you so much. As we round off, I'm just going to have you call out the emergency number one more time, the ambulance emergency numbers. Thank you very much. The emergency numbers for the FCT Emergency Medical Service and Ambulance System is 091-5789-2931 and 091-5789-2932. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kema, for having me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for staying tuned to Health Digest. You heard it right there from Dr. Ozzy when it comes to cancer awareness and cancer management. The deficits, the gray areas that the medical industry needs to fill in and what you can do as an individual. And when it comes to emergency management, as right now the issues are snake bites and more, you know exactly what to do to stay safe and stay sound. That's all the time we have today. Stay blessed and not stressed. I'm Ukemura Tokwa. Bye-bye for now.
AIT, sharing the African experience.
My name's Jung Gwon-jong. I'm the boss of this entire hotel. My duties include heavy lifting, spreading happiness, and driving fancy cars. I'm responsible for the area by the hotel entrance. And I officially moved into the sunroom. You think you can cut my share of the rent?
Say what? you're a maniac.
Most of the time, our lives are lackluster. You add all the brilliant moments, or what we call miracles. Welcome